KoitCast. Today's guest specialises in exploring the fringe and paranormal, with over 40 years of experiencing terrifying sleep paralysis. She's an author of multiple books and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in English from the University of Northwestern in St. Paul, Minnesota. Please give a huge Koit welcome to Vicki Joy Anderson. Hi Vicki, and welcome to KoitCast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No worries, it's great to have you here. You were highly recommended by, I think it was Karen Wilkinson, plus somebody else also suggested you.
Okay,
So
okay,
yeah,
yep. Karen is a dear friend.
excellent stuff. And I want to ask about her later on, actually. There's a little link I want to ask about. Anyway, let's start with, who are you? Where you're from?
My name is Vicki Joy Anderson. I'm from the state of Minnesota. I was born and raised there, but moved around quite a bit, and I'm down in the Ozarks now. Uh, been writing more on a public level for the last 3 or 4 years, even though I've been writing since I was 10. Wanted to be a writer since fifth grade.
Oh,
I
amazing.
never thought I'd be writing about this stuff, though, I can tell you that. The latest book, They Only Come Out at Night, which is about sleep paralysis, that was birthed out of a lifelong experience. I started having it when I was really little. And I don't have the classic stuff anymore where I wake up and I'm being held down, and I don't have all that spooky stuff anymore, thank God. But I had it for well over 40 years. And when I decided to write a book about it, I'm like, well, this will be easy. And realized it really wasn't easy, because even if you've experienced it your whole life, nobody really knows what it is or why is it after me. So it ended up being a very steep learning curve in the research process, but I really wanted to put something out there. A lot of what's been written about the topic online is garbage. It's assumption, it's gaslighting, it's just fiction. And I wanted to put something out, and I wanted to put something out with more of a spiritual, more of a biblical perspective. There's not much out there other than a demon's attacking you, or you're a really sinful person and you opened a door and deserved it.
I like that last one. Right, before we dive into your book and all the great stuff surrounding sleep paralysis, etc., I just want to ask you a couple of throwaway questions. First
Yeah.
one is, your name, Vicky Joy, is that a double-barreled first name, or is it that is a middle name?
That's a great question. It is my middle name. I went by Vicky. In Minnesota, we're really big on pulling your name all the way down to one syllable. And you don't realize this till you go to other states where they don't do that. So I got called Vic most of my life. And my mom purposely named me Vicky Joy. I think I was supposed to be a Kelly, actually. And she renamed me when I was born. And Vicky means victorious or victorious spirit, and joy obviously means joyful. And she purposely named me that because she wanted me to be an overcomer. She wanted me to have victory and joy in my life. And I didn't for a good portion of my life, for most of my life. And when I finally did come into a place of absolute victory and joy, I thought I've earned this name and I'm going to use it.
That is good. I like that because that you had a target to aim for. Did you have a target to aim for, or did it just transpire that way?
I absolutely had a target to name for. I had been overseas enough. I had done some world traveling, and I realized in America, we kind of pick names that sound pretty to us, or it's a family name or whatnot. And I didn't realize that in a lot of other cultures, they pick the name very specifically for the meaning.
The meaning, yeah.
Most people overseas know the meaning of their name, and they believe that that's a calling that's been put on them. It's meaningful to them. And so I always thought that that was meaningful. And I recognized just within my own nuclear family, based upon what all of our names meant, that ironically, the things that we struggled with the most in our lives was the thing that we were named after. And I realized that we have to kind of fight. We almost have to have a battle to fight to come into what our names mean. We have to like earn them. And I had to work very hard to have that victorious spirit and to get that joy. And so I think sometimes you have to realize when you name someone, you name a child something, they may or may not come into the meaning of that name. Usually, the enemy, the universe, whatever you want to label it, wants to steal that from you. And it often takes a lot of hard work and introspection and intentionality to come into those meanings.
Did you know? Well, you didn't know, but it's true that I didn't work on my name at all in any way, shape, or form because my name Paul means small, and I'm
Oh,
small, so I already
oh,
won at birth in theory with that one.
oh my goodness. Well, you certainly are named after a lot of predecessors by the name of Paul who were have very big shoes to fill.
Oh, I like that. I like. And may I ask about the victory side of things?
Yeah, yeah. So I talk about this a lot on other podcasts, and I just don't have any sort of qualms about talking about some of these things. The nice thing here's the flip side. When you're a kid and you've gone through a lot of hardship or a lot of trauma, uh, you are somewhat detached rather from deep, deep, deep emotions. You can kind of take stuff with a grain of salt. Things can kind of roll off your back. You have a really thick skin. So I can talk about all the stuff that happened to me as a kid, and I can even crack jokes about it. And it's not like it doesn't trigger all of this like heartache or self-pity. But I went through a lot as a kid. I was born with a birth defect, orbital hypertelorism. So I was in the hospital the first month of my life and, hanging out there without mom and dad and trying to get it all figured out. And so, yeah, I had to become victorious over everyone's perceptions of me, the assumptions that people make.
Mm,
And what happened a lot is back in the 70s, because I was born in 72, back in the 70s, if you were walking around with a really deformed face or you had been having surgeries and things, people would have an assumption that you were also mentally challenged.
mm,
And so they would talk down to you. And I always looked younger. So even when I was in high school and I was like 17 years old, I looked 12 and I hated it because all my friends had, blossomed into beautiful women and I still looked like this dumb kid. And so there was a lot of people just talking to me like I was stupid. Not in high school, but we'd go to restaurants and I'd be 15 years old and they'd be looking at my parents going, "What does she want to order?" That kind of stuff. And so it actually worked for my good, Paul, because my survival tactic, because it was so insulting to me that people were treating me like I was this, incompetent individual. My war tactic to kind of get around people treating me like that is I decided at a very young age that I was going to learn really big words and I was going to articulate things so that I sounded older than I was, so that they would be convinced once I opened my mouth, like, oh, I've made a massive social faux pas here. Obviously,
mm,
this girl is, and I guess it really worked to my favor because I did then become extremely interested in the English language and in words and in learning words and oration and articulation. And I think it's served me well in my later life. But I had to become victorious over the perception of the people around me. I was constantly having to win people over before they decided, okay, I can be friends with her. Um, but I really think the biggest enemy was myself. To be honest, because we all struggle with these insecurities, for lack of a better word. Nobody wants to talk about them, especially over here in America. Everybody's got to be strong, tough, and independent, and nothing makes me sweat. And it's very exhausting, Paul, having to live in this perpetual um fictional character. It's almost like you're role playing over here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You always have to pretend like nothing's wrong. And you're really in a blessed place if you can find a bunch of friends where you can just be yourself. You can just be real and there's not all the competition and the fakery. And so the the person I really had to gain the most mastery over in the victory was just my own inner thoughts and my own perceptions of who I am and the value that I had. Uh, I had to I had to really come to a place where I thought, you know what? I might not be the typical beautiful, rich American California girl with her beautiful long thick hair and her bikini body, but I have just as much of a right to be here I've also been given a plan and a purpose and a life, and I have things to contribute. I've got things to do before I die. And I had to almost get to a point where I had to convince myself, um, you know, there's more value than just the way we look. Because hey, even if we look great, it's a season. That
Mm.
old age is coming, man,
Ain't
and
that the
so
truth?
we
Yeah.
can't put all the eggs in the same basket. So Paul, there's times in my adult body now with my healed mind where I look back at how I was as a kid and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wasted so much time worried about the external. Like I gave so much undue attention to it. And it's just the way it is. It's the world we live in. It's what's perpetuated. It's what's around us. And when we're young and we haven't come into our giftings or our callings yet, it's kind of all we've got to go on. So I really don't know what else I would have been, distracted with at that young of an age. But, I finally got to the place where I was like, I've got to move on from this. And I worked very hard, Paul. I didn't just wake up one day and it all went away. I had to really face a lot of demons, the figurative, metaphorical demons and all of the things in my head that I thought were going on. And so it was worth the effort. But for anybody out there who wants that kind of victory and joy in their life, joy, we can have happiness, we can have excitement, we can have titillation, but to have joy where you wake up every day and you are determined that you're going to be grateful and you're going to see all the good things, that takes a lot of intentionality and perseverance and self-discipline. You have to fight for delight.
I completely agree. And do you know what? All that sort of like, I mean, I have not gone through the hardships you've gone through, but I have had my own path with difficulties. And you go through that in a young age of a lot of self introspection. And then you come to the point like you did, where you just say, sod it, I'm just going to be. And then everything sort of fruits. Because I was worried for years about being alone. I was up until 32 before I had a girlfriend, I think it was 31, 32. And I was
Yeah.
alone and it worried, it preyed on my mind for so long.
Yes.
And then I just thought, oh, balls to it. I let it go. Do you know what I mean? And then it took care of itself because I was
Yeah.
me and that attracted someone to me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I absolutely know what you mean. We attract what really is the elemental emotions of our heart, soul, and mind, and it's funny. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because a lot of times, especially people like me who deal with these perceptual defects, the ones that you wear on your sleeve that everyone can see, that you have to deal with. And you have to get used to this lifestyle where everywhere you go, what happened to your face? What happened to your face? And you know what, Paul, that was the story of my life for the first probably 17 years of my life. And when I got out of high school and I got out of school and I got out of that, like, rat race of being with my peers every day, I got to this point where when I stopped telling everybody about my face, like apologizing. It's like I wanted to beat people in the punch. Like let's beat people to the punch because eventually they're going to ask what happened, and if I don't tell them, it's going to be niggling on them, and I'd rather tell them right up front than to be a year into this friendship and thinking that they love me and they really don't care, and then, well, what did happen to your face? I'm like, oh, you too. You have to know, don't you? Everybody has to know. You almost
Yeah.
feel like everyone's like entitled to it. And so I would beat people to the punch. And so when I would introduce people, I'd be like, I'm Vicki, but I was born with a birth defect. And I'd have to I'd have to give my little apology. And what I realized is that was really giving instructions to people as to how to treat me. This girl thinks she's lesser. She's basically just said from the get-go that I'm the dominant one in this relationship because I'm more attractive than her. I didn't realize that I was basically giving people the instructions and the permissions, like treat me like this dowdy person full of self-pity. Once the self-pity went away, once I stopped leading with that, I I can't even remember the last time someone's asked me what happened to your face. Like I talk about it a lot on podcasts because it absolutely weaves into the story of why I had sleep paralysis because it does come It's very much a thing that rides on the coattails of kids that have gone through stuff, childhood trauma, that kind of stuff, which for me was the surgeries. And so it plays into it. But once I stopped not caring about what people thought and just decided, hey, I'm just gonna I'm gonna put forth my best qualities when I meet someone. I'm gonna show my smile and my humor and my intelligence. People don't ask me anymore. I used to get stopped on the street and in stores, like, what happened to your face? And some people it was empathetic, and other people it was unconsciously sort of violating. What happened to your face? Right?
I know what you mean.
But people don't do that anymore. They might be wondering. I also think we live in a different world. There's been 3 decades of integration where there's a lot of integration in public school classrooms now. And so a lot of kids now are being raised with the children who have the CP and who have the autism and the Asperger's. And so I think kids now, because of the integration in classrooms and because of television, there's so much more integration on television. I think kids nowadays are a lot more knowledgeable, but back in the 70s and beforehand, where the handicapped were hidden away and we weren't exposed to them as much, it was more of a shock to a kid when a kid saw it. So you'd run into a kid at a store and they'd be like, well, what happened to her? Because you stood out more. And so I do think with everything that's going on in the world that we might want to point a finger at, I do think at least we have gotten to a place where we are much more better about expanding the world and opening the doors so that people with perceptual disabilities and mental and physical disabilities, they can live out in the open and be left alone and be treated like everybody else. And so at least there's one good thing that I'm observing. I hope that's true. There might be
I
people
would
with
say.
disabilities watching this saying, yeah, I wish, but at least in America, I feel that's happening.
I would say it's also happening here. I'd say the trajectory is certainly in towards the positive. Let's just put it that way. I don't know how
Yeah.
fast or slow that's going, but I know it's going the right way. Well, look, thank you for talking about that. It's great to have people talk about things that do affect their lives, and I try to get to the core of characters on my show because I like what makes people tick.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said it alludes to the topic that we're going to mainly talk about tonight, which is the sleep paralysis. Now, I have another question for you, which I normally ask up front, which is, what was your paranormal introduction? So, is it the sleep paralysis event?
Yeah, most definitely. Most
Okay, so
definitely.
let's jump straight into that then.
All right. All right. So the first sleep paralysis episode that I 100% remember and I can detail
Hmm.
because there were other things going on. I have little memories of things like before 4 years old. I remember living in Virginia where I was 2 years old when we lived in Virginia. And I remember an incident where I told my mom that I was afraid of the dark and I was having nightmares. And I remember it only because it ended up being kind of a funny story later on in life. She said, you don't have to be afraid because the angels are watching over you. Well, I'm 2 years old, so I'm not familiar with this term. And I asked her, well, what's an angel? And she gave me the 2-year-old answer. So she left out a lot of details. It was they're big, they're bright, and they're everywhere. So she leaves my dark bedroom, and I don't see anything big, bright, or everywhere. So I'm really cynical that she knows what she's talking about. So I got up to investigate, and I stood up on my bed and I looked out the window, and the only big, bright thing that I saw everywhere were these street lights going all the way up and down the street. And I thought, well, I guess I am safe. They're parked all the way up and down the street, and I went to bed, and so what was behind that? Was it just one nightmare I'd had? I don't know, but that's what at least makes me suspicious that it might have been going on before 4 years old. But fast forward to 4 years old, we're now living in Pennsylvania, and um, I remember the first sleep paralysis incident I had, and it's intense because this was also an out of body experience, though it would take me many years of reflection to really put that together. Because instead of waking up paralyzed, I woke up in my room, but I really wasn't awake. It was an altered dream state. I believed that I was woke up in my dark bedroom and I was afraid. And one of the things that I kind of one of my catchphrases, if you will, Paul, is I say, there's always a glitch. Like one of the ways you can tell if you really are awake in your bedroom or not, or if you are in the astral realm and there's just a screen memory there of your room, is there's always a glitch in the landscape. And I don't know if it's because they can't quite get it right. Their tech is bad, or if they have to kind of give that away. That's kind of like their way out, like, hey, well, you should have figured out you weren't in your room. That wall wasn't there, or that's not what your bed looks like. And the glitch, though there's no way in the world I would have picked up on this at 4 years old. The glitch was that my bedroom door was closed and locked. And in real life, I'm a 4-year-old kid. I didn't sleep
Hmm.
with my door closed, and I didn't have a lock on my door. And so even if my door had been closed, it wouldn't have been locked because there's no lock on my door in real life. And so in the dream, even though I felt tremendous amounts of pressure and it wasn't easy to move, I got out of my bed and ran to the door, and I was fighting with the lock and crying and trying to get the lock open. I was trying to scream and nothing was coming out of my throat. It was that forced, like where you've got like your throat filling up with like, foam and you can't talk. And the fear is increasing, it's heightening. And in my head, I did not hear an audible voice, but in my head, I was being haunted. And the voices weren't demonic or growling or spooky. I just heard voices saying they can't hear you because I'm crying up for my parents. They can't hear you, and even if they could, they wouldn't come get you.
That's
And
nice.
so,
Yeah.
we always talk about the trauma of sleep paralysis with just being it's frightening, and some people see the shadow people or they see other things, and we can get into that. But an element of sleep paralysis that doesn't always get talked about, but it's very psychologically damning. And especially when you're a little kid, and especially if you're a little kid who's being targeted because you already have some sort of trauma or dysfunction going on. When you have trauma as a kid, you're searching for a safe place, right? Every time I go out, someone's making a comment about my face. Every time I go to school, I'm getting teased. Every time I go to the hospital, they're poking needles in me. My home was my one safe place. And so when these things, these beings, these entities, these creatures, these demons, whatever you in your vernacular or worldview want to ascribe them as being, when these things are coming to you in your only remaining safe place, there is a psychological level of fear that's being developed with your developing brain. And that is Earth itself is not safe. Even my sleep, when I'm awake, it's not safe. When it's asleep, I'm not. When I'm asleep, it's not safe. When I'm out in the public, it's not safe. When I'm in my own home, it's not safe. And it burns these concepts in your head that put you almost in this survival mode. I'm on my own. I got to watch out for myself. Well, 4-year-olds aren't designed to watch out for themselves
Hmm.
in that world. So it puts you in this heightened kind of foxhole mentality, even though you don't realize it until you're much older and you burn out from it. You burn out from all of the self-protecting measures and paranoia that you're experiencing. And then another psychological aspect of sleep paralysis is these aren't just ghosts saying, boo, scared you, ha ha ha. These are entities that are whispering things into your head that are beyond your capacity to sort of work through. And they're not just saying things about your worldview or the religious system that you're part of, because they're trying to break all that down. They're trying to get you to question and doubt everything. And so you've got a layer of confusion that's coming in. And then you've got a layer of harassment because they're bullies too. And not everyone has this experience. People have different experiences. Some people, they encounter these beings and the beings put on a persona of friendship. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. So there's some people that'll say, "Oh no, they're really nice," And then there's people where it's just you're gonna die, you're gonna burn in hell. You've got the horror movie version of it. But then for me, and maybe I got this version of it because this was what I was getting in real life. or maybe this is the way I was perceiving it, because this was the way I was perceiving a threatening human being in the waking life as someone that was pointing out my weaknesses or the way that I looked, I was being bullied. And so I felt in my youth that my sleep paralysis entities were more bullies. They would taunt me, and they would say, no one can hear you, nobody cares about you, you can't scream, you're all alone. And then as I got older and my religious worldview got more sophisticated, but yet I was still young. It was the like, Jesus isn't real, Jesus is a jerk, Jesus is one of us, so there's entire psychological layers of taunting and gaslighting and confusion and worldview confusion, and one could say grooming in various areas. So it's almost a shame that the sleep paralysis discussion always lands on shadow person, hat person, incubus, succubus, woman in a rocking chair, red glowing eyes, dark shadows, alien grays. We're so intrigued. Obviously, we're intrigued with the cast of characters in the event, but we don't always look at the multi-tentacled attack that these things have and how it affects someone physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically.
Awesome. Now, there's a lot of great stuff in there, and it's obviously ominous that you use the term they or the word they.
Yes.
We'll get into that, I think, more deeper in a sec. But let's take it back for people who probably haven't entered this massive world of all the entities and stuff that you're going to allude to in a second. So, in layman's terms, what do we say is sleep paralysis? Take
Yeah.
out
Yep.
all the supernatural elements.
Yep. We always have to start there. We can't
Mm.
assume that people know. It's a fairly new term. It really has only been around since kind of the early 2000s. And I personally think it is a terrible moniker. It really isn't it's inaccurate. And because it's inaccurate, it's just another layer of gaslighting that the people that suffer from it get. Because here's what happens. You have a whole bunch of people, including the people that have the sleep paralysis that we're talking about, that have sleep paralysis with nothing scary happening at all. There's no shadow people, there's no ominous threats in the room, etc. So you've got millions of people who have had sleep paralysis without the terrible aspects, looking at these people talking about all this stuff that happens when they wake up with sleep paralysis, and they're going, well, you're nuts. I wake up with sleep paralysis all the time, and that doesn't happen to me. So whether that phrase was intentionally or unintentionally chosen, it's really unfortunate for the people who are trying to find help, because there there is just there are sleep phases, deep sleep phases and REM phases where our body physiologically is designed to go into states of paralysis. It's a protective device. This is why we don't sleepwalk. We don't kick and beat people up in the middle of the sleep. We don't fall down the stairs. We don't urinate. So when you've got these people that have experiences in their sleep where they're thrashing about, or they're having whole conversations with the person next to them, or they're being aggressive, or they're getting up and they're wandering all over the house, or they're wetting the bed. This is that there's an aspect of that physiological paralytic function that is going haywire, because they're not being grounded to their bed. So there's nothing paranormal or supernatural or ominous about being grounded to your bed, being paralyzed. And every time we go in or out of sleep, we have these little windows of altered states of consciousness. And this can happen numerous times during the night, depending upon how many times a person wakes up in the middle of the night. And there's fancy scientific terms for this as you come into sleep. If you're coming out of sleep or you're going into sleep, it's hypnopompic or hypnagogic. Those are just the fancy terms. And it's all perfectly normal. You are a normal human being going in and out of sleep. So what we're more accurately talking about in my book, and what we're going to be talking about today, is we're talking about a sleep paralysis episode or a sleep paralysis attack. It is a supernatural event that is occurring conveniently during a time when we are paralyzed at night. So just understand, for all you people out there who have had sleep paralysis where you've kind of woke up and you can't quite move yet, and it almost kind of feels like you're going under anesthesia. It actually feels somewhat euphoric. It feels very good. And it is 100% possible. It's common to have those experiences without any of the ominous underpinnings that come along with it for some people. And so when we talk about the sleep paralysis episodes, we are talking about people who experience it runs the gamut, Paul. There is no way to ever put down in a list everything that people have experienced. Every once in a while, someone contacts me and I hear something I have never heard before. It falls outside of the outliers. The most common stuff you're going to hear, if you're talking to someone who's, say, 40 years old or older, the most common things you're going to hear are shadow people, hat man, incubus, succubus, ugly old woman, beautiful seductress woman, little girl, like a little giggling girl, kind of like in the Omen movies. Or I'm sorry, I always say the Omen, The Shining, in the Shining movies. You're going to get the old woman in the rocking chair. You're going to get red glowing eyes, alien grays, and you're going to get the shadow in the room that's hovering where it's not a shape or a person. There's just a part in the room that's blacker than black. And these are the most common things. And you're going to hear, I can't move, I can't breathe. There's something sitting on my chest. I'm being strangled. It can go from there into, some people experience violence. They're being pulled off the bed. Some people, their body is vibrating or their entire bed is vibrating. This is usually the start of an OBE, which is an out of body experience. This is usually a pulling up into the astral. Now, it's interesting when terror absolutely escalates to levels of not being able to handle it, the the body will dissociate and you'll usually wake up. And I have never seen this until I think last year. And I think it was a cartoon. And I can't recall it. Maybe one of your listeners will put it in the comments. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a cartoon. Oh, I almost had it, Paul. I almost had it.
It'll
Oh,
come to you.
oh, it was Slumberland. Okay. Slumberland. And Slumberland was like a animated movie. It wasn't a cartoon. It was kind of like a Pixar animation type of a thing. And it was based on an older Japanese anime called The Adventures of Nemo, I think. But it's all about the Nightmare King and the Mind Flayers in the true D&D sense, the humanoid Davy Jones figures with the octopus or the squid head. You know, that's the true Mind Flayer. Stranger Things, they use it kind of like an arachnid in the sky. That's not really accurate. Like the tentacles is sort of a hat tip to it, but the true Mind Flayer in D&D, it's the Illithids, and they are humanoids with octopus heads. And so they're of the marine spirit world, the Cthulhu, the H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu world. And in Nightmare King, there's a montage where when she's in the dream world, or probably more accurately, the astral realm, when she's in the astral, there are a whole bunch of other characters, which are other people having dreams. And as soon as the other people in the dreams, as soon as they realize where they are or, you know, what's going on, they become really scared and they blow up or they disappear or they like go away like a balloon. And I thought, I can't believe what they're showing us here. I can't believe what they're showing us here, because there is something about fear that when we reach a certain point of fear, our mind dissociates. And so they even tell you, for the people that like want to learn how to astral project, it's all over the internet. You're going to have to go through sleep paralysis first, and you have to control your fear, because if you're afraid, you'll wake up and it won't work. So everybody knows that there's this part that where if you don't control your fear, you're going to ruin the experience, so to speak. And sleep paralysis is really, this is the way I would compare it. You have a bunch of people out there who want to astral project, and they're perfecting it, and they're learning about it, and they're practicing it, and it's very intentional. Sleep paralysis is the abduction version. I'm astraling in my dreams every night, but I didn't ask for this, and I don't want this, and I want this to stop. It's a violation. It's like, I didn't ask to go up there. So there's people that are going up there exploring and having a great old time. And then there's people who are like, I want nothing to do with this. And I'm not a willful participant in this. And maybe they are unwittingly, because as we may discuss later, but it is in my book, they have to have permission.
And
And
that's an
so
interesting thought.
if you have no memory of opening this door or making a vow or an oath or a covenanting, if you have no memory of giving these things permission, that's then, if you're trying to get rid of this, that's then what you have to really work on. At what point did I give these things permission? Because I need to annul these covenants, so to speak. That's really the crux of it. So I'm veering off course, but just to kind of finish that sleep paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
Sleep paralysis for 40 years and older is this, getting you up into the astral. The younger people, it's very fascinating. I'm starting now to talk to more younger people, and they're experiencing something much different. Theirs is more of and it's the same thing. Like, we call it lucid dreaming, but they call it reality shifting or shifting. And instead of the astral realm, they'll call it more like the metaverse. Like, they're going to different metaverses at night. I want to go to the Harry Potter world. I want to go to like the DC or Marvel comic world. I want to be Batman. I want to be, fill in the blank. And the younger people, this is kind of my theory, Paul. You can seduce someone with vinegar or honey, right? And the older generations, because we weren't allowed to talk about this stuff, or we'd be labeled schizophrenic or demon possessed. So we weren't allowed to talk about it. So we learned to just tough it out. So the things could get us with vinegar. They could scare us. They could do whatever they wanted because they knew we were not going to tell anybody. We didn't have the environment, the parents, the grandparents, or the internet. We didn't have a outlet. We couldn't go online the next day and say, holy crap, you guys aren't going to believe what happened to me last night. And then 100 other people validating them. That happened to me. That happened to me. That happened to me. We didn't have that. So we had the vinegar approach. But now we have a younger generation, and they're getting the honey. Hey, come on to the astral. You can be Harry Potter tonight, and you can be a magician. Or, hey, come to the metaverse tonight. The most beautiful girl in the class is going to fall in love with you. And so they're getting the honey approach. And the entities that they're seeing are more, they're duplicates of media. So they're not saying, I'm seeing a shadow or a hat man. They're actually saying, I saw Gollum from Lord of the Rings. I saw Darth Maul from Star Wars. Like,
That's
they
cool.
actually they have the names, like, because these things are presenting in these things have always presented culturally, right? So the banshee up in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, we don't get the banshee here in America because we don't know what it is, right? And you get different kind of voodoo and hoodoo, different kind of characters in different regions. And there's a few pages in my book. It was one of the most fascinating parts of the research, where I kind of go around the world and I tell you what they call sleep paralysis in their culture, and what entity they think it is, or what god they think it is, or what witch they think it is. Very fascinating that these things mask according to your cultural banshee, so that when you talk about it, grandma will just say, like, oh yeah, that's the banshee, haha. And then there's all this mythology surrounding it. So it's just a fairy tale. And it's just this grand form of gaslighting that, oh yeah, you just, you saw this or that. Well, interestingly, with the younger generations, they culturally identify not so much with their own region. They culturally identify with media. They culturally identify with gaming and movies. And their world is the VR world. And so the entities are appearing to them not as their stereotypical cultural things like, oh, the Hat Man or the Shadow Man. They're coming as these characters. It's the Voldemorts, it's the Darth Mauls, it's the Gollums, it's the things like that. So very fascinating. The experience of the younger people is far more tech driven. It's far more quantum physics. It's far more driven by I lost my thought there, Paul. The younger generation, it's far more time travel, glitch kind of stuff.
Because they're influenced by current day media, etc. So they're thinking along those lines.
Yes.
The whole sleep paralysis thing is incredibly interesting because I see it there's two ways that life looks at it, right? There's the way that you've been speaking about, and then there's this what the scientific approach, how they
Hmm.
would term it as what it is, which is
Hmm.
why I wanted to start with in layman's terms what is sleep paralysis, and then go into a scientific reasoning. Now, I think you alluded to the scientific reasoning is part of our sleep process that keeps us safe during the sleep cycle. Essentially,
Yes.
that's ultimately what it is. And I know there's that part where you almost fall asleep and then you sort of wake, jolt
Yeah.
yourself up, which is also part of the legacy of presumably like sleeping in trees and things to stop yourself
Mm,
falling
mm.
out.
Ah, yeah.
I think that's what that is. Um, I want to know what scientists say sleep paralysis is so that we can then look at the other side of it. Because you said something interesting. Sleep paralysis is a thing that science acknowledges, and then that's where the attacks coincide with that window, so to speak.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. This is a great part of the discussion. I'm so glad we get to talk about this. My whole book
Cool.
starts here. My book starts with, you know what? We have to stop compartmentalizing this discussion because we have pastors and priests over here, because even within Christendom, we have a Catholic and a Protestant view of it that differ slightly. And so even within a religious definition of it, you have dissension. And then we've got the medical, the scientific, and then you've got the New Age explanation, you've got the occult explanation. Everybody has got these different understandings. And really, instead of doing the typical human thing, like you think something different than me, so I feel somehow threatened by you, and so I just have to gaslight you and discredit you before I've really even heard
I need to
everything you have
jump
to
in
say.
something here.
Yeah,
Sorry to
please.
intervene. Gaslighting. I hear this term a lot, and do you know what? I've been hearing it for like 10 years now, but I never really looked up what it means. What is
Ah,
it? Where does that come
okay.
from?
It comes from a movie, of course, where Americans get all of their new words, right? Oh, geez. It's an old black and white movie, and I ironically actually saw it as a kid. Back in the old days, the movie, the lights were lit by gas in the house. And basically there was a man who married a very wealthy widow, and he was basically trying to drive her crazy so that she would pass away or go into an institution and he could inherit all of her wealth. And so he would go up into the attic and he would twist the knobs or whatever, and the lights would flicker, and she would go into her drawers and things were there, like he had planted things there, and she's like, I must be crazy. And so he pretty much had convinced her that she was a nutcase, and she was just about to snap, and then she got up in the attic and caught him in the act, so to speak. And so when we say that someone's gaslighting us, it's that someone is setting us up to look like we're a nut so that
Got
we're
ya.
discredited or they have some sort of purpose in it. So
And it's
yeah,
just a bloke. It's just a bloke in the loft fiddling with his knob.
exactly. It's a bloke with his knob. Exactly. You got it. Um, so, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So, what we have to do, and this is again where I started my book, it's like, hey, I know that typically pastors don't want to sit down with occultists and New Agers, and religion doesn't want to sit down with medicine. Okay, but if we all sat down at the table and actually just heard each other out, hey, if somebody says something that ruffles your feathers or you disagree with or it goes against your religion, just you don't have to you don't have to sign on the dotted line. You don't have to go home with a Baphomet patch on your jacket. Like just settle down, just listen to what they're saying, you know? Because if everybody brings their puzzle piece to the table, we might get a fuller picture of what is going on. Now, I do think that there are people out there that are intentionally keeping it under wraps, but I think there's a lot of people that aren't intentionally keeping it under wraps. And if there's people of all of those persuasions that genuinely want to get to the bottom of it, if those people got to the table to talk, if there wasn't any sort of troll at the table trying to, make hard work of it, I think that we could get somewhere. So the typical stuff you're going to see online, if you're looking at the scientific and medical reports and articles and case studies, they're going to pith the spiritual aspects out of it because that's not their job. That's
Sure.
not what they do. And it's always controversial when you see medical papers on like what's the effect of on prayer with healing, and do more people get healed if there's prayer? Because it's all inconclusive. Because even if they realize, okay, we have 1,000 people who are sick, and we prayed for 500 of them, and we didn't pray for the other 500, and a vastly larger percentage of the people being prayed for got healed, they're still going to come to a conclusion at the end where it's inconclusive, because the way we think in our world now with the scientific method, with things that stand up in court, how do you really prove emphatically beyond a shadow of a doubt that the people in the control group that got healed, how do you really know ultimately it was the prayer? How do you really know that they weren't at home taking a supplement? How do you know that maybe they weren't as sick as the people in the other control group? Like there's too many variables that the person
Exactly.
reading, like they're, and even as a religious person, I can tell you, I understand. I emotionally and experientially believe in prayer, but if you tried to replicate that in a lab and emphatically prove that it was the prayer that healed the person, I understand with the intellect part of me that that would have to be inconclusive. I
Yeah,
I,
because
I
there's no
get it.
nuts and bolts, is there? There's no
Right,
hard and fast data, so to speak.
right. So with that said, I'm not against science. I am certainly not against medicine. I spent the first 15 years of my life in the hospital getting reconstructive surgery. I have a life today because of brilliant doctors who knew how to help me. So I don't want anyone to hear that I'm like bad mouthing them. But the typical stuff you're going to get online is it's it's an adjunct of narcolepsy. It's some sort of sleep apnea. And this is the thing too, which came first, the chicken or the egg? This is so fascinating. I stumbled upon this accidentally, Paul. Whenever I talk to someone now with sleep paralysis who've had it habitually their entire life, not just once or twice, I'll say, I know this seems like a disjointed question, but do you breathe out of your mouth or your nose? And I have a 99% comeback that they breathe out of their mouth. I think one person I talked to said that they breathe out of their nose. And so it becomes a what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because a lot of these people having sleep paralysis will talk about respiratory issues. I feel like I can't breathe, whatnot. Now, a lot of people, if you're a mouth breather, you're already going to have more trouble breathing when you lay down. It's just not a comfortable position to be gasping for breath out of your mouth. It's just not, it just doesn't work. And so you've got these physiological aspects that you can't deny. And so if someone asks me, well, how do you know that people aren't just having sleep paralysis because they're breathing out of their mouth and there's just something respiratorily weak in their body? That, you know what, Paul? There might be something there.
I agree,
Absolutely.
because that's where my logic would take me, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I am not one of these people. I was born and raised in a Christian home, Paul, and I am I do want to view these things through biblical lenses. I'm not trying to hide that fact, but the fact of the matter is I also have a brain, and logic and common sense are very important to me. Finding the absolute truth is important to me. And I know that sometimes things are happening, it's multi-layered. We can't separate our physical and spiritual, like our heart, soul, mind, and body is all intermingled. So to say this is just something spiritual or this is just something physiological, that's not the way our bodies work. Our bodies, we don't compartmentalize our mind and our body and our heart and our spirit. So why would an experience be compartmentalized? So the same way I tell a fellow believer, if you want to believe that this is 100% demonic, I'm okay with that. There might be cases where there's something demonic going on. But you can't ignore the way the body is designed, because this is the film projector. Like if you look at sleep paralysis as this movie projecting before your eyes at night, or this dream sequence, then our body is that film projector. That's something tangible. That's something physical. Our physical body is what is making this theater of the night possible, because the dream is the screen. What we're seeing and perceiving is our mind, but we're the projector. That if we didn't have a projector, they couldn't do this. We'd
What an
be
incredible
disembodied.
image. I like
Yeah,
that. As a, oh,
yeah,
sorry, good metaphor or analogy, whatever that word is for that. Yeah, I like it a
yeah.
lot.
So, a lot of people with sleep paralysis do have narcolepsy. Because guess what? If shadow people are showing up in your room night after night after night after night, you are going to just start staying up later and later and later. You're going to start avoiding sleep. Then you're going to get into horrible sleep patterns. Your circadian rhythm is going to be jacked. And you're going to have nightmares, because even if you don't have sleep paralysis, you're going to have a lot of nightmares because you're going to go to bed in a stressed level. Your cortisol is all excited. And so as a result of night after night after night, compounding into weeks, into months, into years, you are going to have sleep deprivation. There's a whole bunch of physical and mental issues that come with sleep deprivation. So it's all intertwined. But to
Mm.
then just say, oh, hey, you have sleep deprivation. Here's a sleeping pill. If you don't also acknowledge a potential spiritual element to it, now you're going to have someone where the shadow man's going to show up, and now you're going to be knocked out on a sleep pill and you can't even wake up from it. So you have to, in order to truly help the victim or the patient, you have to acknowledge that there are aspects going on. Now, here's something super fascinating about the scientific physiological aspect, and let's bring this into our modern tech world.
Okay.
And this is going to confuse the issue in a good way. So we now know through various drugs and what we've learned about the brain, every aspect of the sleep paralysis experience can be replicated in the wide awake realm using drugs or probes. So, for example, there's a particular region of the brain. Every time I do a podcast, this doesn't always come up, and I'm always like, I've got to look at that. The region of the brain, it's very long and hard to pronounce, and so it goes by initials. But there's a region of the brain where if it is probed, you will see a shadow person.
Yes, I've
So
heard of
all
this before, funnily
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
So if you've got the probe at the right place and the doctor's poking at it, you're going to see a shadow person. Now, it's not going to be full on right in front of you saying, hey, it's going to be like one of those off to the side peripheral things, and you look
Mm.
and then it's not there. And so, again, as much as I would love to side with Christianity and say, oh, all these things are demons, they're demons, and they're after you because you played with that Ouija board at a slumber party. Here's the deal. How do I know in some cases that you're having sleep paralysis because you have a cyst or a growth in your brain,
Pressing
and
on
it's
that
and
area.
it's and it's
Yeah.
pressing on that area? Like this is where I'm always telling people on the other side of the aisle, we have to have an intellectually honest discussion about this. And so I do too. As a Christian, I also have to be intellectually honest that there may be statistically a percentage of people that have had sleep paralysis their whole life, where if that little thing pressing on the lobe in their brain got removed, they might never have it again.
Yeah.
Okay. There's another thing. I love this. This is so fascinating to me. And I'm not a nurse. I'm not an EMT, so I'm talking out my butt here, but this is really interesting. There is a muscle inhibitor called succinylcholine. They call it SUX for short, SUX, because it's long. Succinylcholine. It's a muscle inhibitor, and it's used for intubation. They will give succinylcholine to a patient so that all the muscles relax and they can
Yeah.
get a tube down the throat. But because the side effects of succinylcholine are so sort of mentally and emotionally off setting to a human being, you will always be sedated before they give you succinylcholine. So if you were to receive a dose of succinylcholine without being sedated, you would feel many of the same things that sleep paralysis sufferers are experiencing. I can't move. I feel pressure on my chest. And because of that, what happens to a human being when they feel paralyzed or they feel out of control? Anxiety,
Panic,
levels of
yeah.
anxiety rise. And because it's a drug that's affecting perception and whatnot, that anxiety of what's going on, I can't move, can turn into fright. Now, if you get an overdose of succinylcholine, if you're given more of it than is required, it can actually kill a person. And if you read, I don't know if it's still online, but 3 years ago when I was writing it, I I I I read this amazing article. It's called something like Succinylcholine, the world's most discreet murder weapon. And it talks about an actual case in the United States where kind of the same thing we were talking about with gaslight, a very young male nurse or orderly of some kind married a divorced doctor, hoping to get the moolah. And he killed her by giving her an overdose of succinylcholine. And
I better
uh,
write that down quickly for Tiff. She'll love that.
yeah, succinylcholine. Yeah, right. And it's untraceable. No, no, no. I'm not giving people. Oh, no, no, no.
That's the thing, isn't it? You're giving the plans online.
Beep, 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 beep. Okay. So this article describes, and the article has nothing to do with sleep paralysis. But I'd seen an episode of like Forensic Files or something years ago, and it just fascinated me. And so I found this article. When I actually read the article and it was describing what it would feel like to die of a succinylcholine overdose, it actually gave me goosebumps because I'm like, that's sleep paralysis. And so years later, when I came to write the book in the effort to be, hey, let's be intellectually honest, um, there there are drugs out there and there are medical procedures out there. If they wanted to simulate a sleep paralysis experience, they could do it. They have the technology and the knowledge now to do it. So there's two ways you can look at that. Oh, well, then that's all this has been the whole entire time. This is just people with something on their brain. They've got a lot of stress. They're coming out of trauma that affected brain development. So there might be something in the brain, and then they're taking medications for their anxiety, and that's interacting. And that's all that this is. So with this information that it all can be reproduced, we can just throw all of it into the bucket of this is maybe just people with some stuff going on in the brain. Or we can look at it and say, oh, wow, because all of this is physiologically tied to our brain, whether it's being probed or we've taken some sort of a sedative or a medication that has affected the brain, we could also ask the question, what if they have the ability to influence our minds and they know where all the switches are and they're up there flipping the switches and doing the probing and
Doing the
whatever.
probing, yeah. I have a quick
Because,
question to interject here. Sorry
yeah,
to ruin your train of thought. This succinylcholine or whatever the word was, is it naturally occurring in our brain as
that's a
as an
really
element?
that's a really good question. I don't think so. I think it's a muscle relaxer, more accurately, it's a muscle inhibitor. It's something that makes all the muscles. Now, with that said, because again, I'm not an EMT, are there times during stress or trauma or near death or whatever where all of our muscles do naturally relax and is something being released in our system that does that? Or is succinylcholine a synthetic reproduction of maybe something that's
Hmm.
natural in our brain that they sort of reverse engineered and turned into a sedative? I don't know. That's a good
Yeah.
question.
That's where I was going because it could be if there was, I mean, I'm just playing the scientific devil's advocate here. If there was a chemical element or something in our brain that did that switch, you could then throw an extra, say, 10% into the bucket of solved, so to speak,
Yep,
couldn't you?
absolutely.
On that note, actually, I'm going to interject it here because I think we're going to then veer off into the more supernatural and attacking component. Have we, or as sorry, has there been research done with like where we scan the brain while somebody has had or is having an experience of sleep paralysis, so we know, oh, this area lights up, that sort of thing?
I think so. Now, I'm not really familiar with too many of the results or conclusions from those studies, but yes, there are tons of people who have sleep paralysis have had sleep studies,
Hmm.
and they go to the Sleep Study Institute, and most of them just go home with the sleep apnea machine and are, given some melatonin. Um, I haven't gone into great depth as to what is actually being concluded in those sleep studies. That might be an actual place for me to kind of continue my research. I don't think that a lot of those sleep studies are able, though, to capture the spiritual aspect of it, which again is why I think the medical industry isn't taking that seriously. Because what's interesting about the spiritual aspect is it's not physical. The reason why we can't move or scream during this particular period of the attack is because I will submit, you are no longer in your body. You have now been pulled out of your body. You are in an astral area, and you are seeing your bedroom, but it is a screen memory, as to borrow a phrase from the UFO experiencer world. And when you attempt to move or run or speak, if you attempt to do anything that would connect you to your physical body, you're unable to do it because you don't have access to it in that moment. And so actually getting out of the situation in the astral realm is 100 times easier in the physical. You don't have to run away and you don't have to scream. It's all telepathic. In your mind, you can say, I do not consent. You can say, I want to wake up. I did not agree to be here. Jesus, help me. You can, whatever is your
I've used
thing.
that phrase before, by the way.
Yes, it works.
Hmm.
And and so what we have to realize is my conclusions, and I'll just preface this, Paul, with nobody knows. We're still trying to figure this out. We don't know. I'm not an authority on this, like I've got this figured out. Um, but given my experiences, the hundreds of people I've talked to, and the very honed in questions I've now learned to ask these people, is we're coming to realize, because this is the way we've always described it, myself included. I wake up in my bedroom. That's the way everybody starts their sleep paralysis story. I woke up and I couldn't move. It's always prefaced with, I woke up. I have a theory, because my sleep paralysis experiences always started in the dream. I'm in REM. I'm having a normal dream. I'm at school. I'm hanging out with my parents. Whatever. You're you show up to school and realize you're naked. You have to play a grand piano
I do that
concerto.
all the time in real life. I don't. I'm getting that I don't equip before people assume.
Oh man. In the dream, I would hear a vibration in my ears that sounded kind of like a helicopter. It would go,
I can't hear that because of compression on the mic, but I get what you're
okay,
doing. Yeah,
okay. So it would,
like that.
exactly. It would, and the second I started hearing that noise, it would trigger a memory. I know what's coming. Here it comes again. And there would be instant fear. Jesus, help me. And then I would wake up. Thank God I woke up. Thank God I woke up, because that was about to get bad. But then when you wake up, you have to work through the sleep paralysis. You have to work through the shadow guy in the room and whatever. And then you really wake up. But here's the deal. If the sleep paralysis experience is starting in REM, it's You're being confronted by something actually while you are fully asleep. When you wake up, here's the question. Is the physical reaction that have been explaining for hundreds of years? My heart is pounding. I'm terrified. All my saliva is dried up. I'm on my back, usually in a defensive position. Am I reacting to the shadow man I'm now seeing in my room? Or is the shadow man a diversion so that we will never ask the question, why is my heart pounding? Why is all the saliva dried up in my mouth? Why am I in a fight or flight reaction right now? Could it be, and let's put on the back burner, let's think at the same time, UFO abductees, they come back, they know something happened because there's missing time, but they have no memory. Think of the MIB movies, the little flashlights. Okay, think of the UFO abductees that have had real life MIB encounters where the black suits show up at the door and then they're kind of stoned for 15 minutes and they remember the men in black showing up, but they don't remember what happened. If something is happening in the dream world, similar to what's happening to people who are taken away by the Greys, now we're in a different location. We've got different entities. It's not the same thing. Sleep paralysis, it's a different thing. But if it's the same agenda, let's say compartmentalized organization, same CEO, right? You're in the astral. You're in a dream. You're abducted into the astral. You wake up with no memory of what you did there, who you met, what you said, what you agreed to. Now, the interesting thing about sleep paralysis is there's several other layers of obscurity where someone is never going to ask questions. You know, with the UFO abductees, if you're at mile marker 1 and then in the next split second you're at mile marker 100 and the sun has gone down, you're going to start asking questions because that's weird. But if you go to bed at 10 p.m. and you wake up at 7 a.m., you're not going to ask questions what happened all the time. And even if you have a fragment of a memory of something creepy or weird or scary, it's a bad dream. All their bases are covered. But if you wake up with no memory of a dream and you're waking up with sweat all over your body, your sheets are soaked, your heart is pounding, and you don't have a nightmare to attach that to, you're going to start asking questions. Well, what happened? Why did I wake up in this state? So I believe that the shadow people and the hat man and the people in the room, I almost think that that's perhaps in some cases a diversion, because now you wake up with no memory of what you really just participated in the astral realm. You see something terrifying that completely explains away everything that you're physiologically experiencing. You don't question the missing time. You don't question the nightmare if you have any memory of it. And you don't question why you're having such a visceral physical reaction because you see this shadow person. So I do think that this idea that sleep paralysis is waking up in your room and not being able to move is the tail end of a much longer event that we don't remember.
That's freaky and scary in itself.
It is.
I've had one sleep paralysis experience, and I know it was scary as shit when I was going through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, to coin a phrase,
Mm.
I remember waking up, like you mentioned, that most people
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see anything, but I felt a presence. I didn't
Yes.
feel heavy on the chest or anything like that. But I
Okay.
know for a fact I couldn't move. I was in my room in exactly the same lying down position, and my vision was from the same perspective as if I was naturally lying down, right? So if I was out of body, I would have been face slightly above my body. That's all I could
Yes.
assume if that was the
Yes.
case.
Yes.
And then I did try to do all the screaming to mum and dad next door because I was living at home at that time,
Yeah.
and nothing happened. And I can't remember how it concluded, but I know I remember feeling absolutely terrified, which I don't normally do because I'm quite a relaxed and steady line person. I don't get too excited and I don't get too scared.
Yeah.
Freaky as hell.
Yeah.
So, the question from what you've alluded to is that I could have been abducted, and then that tail end memory of sleep paralysis or whatever it was, that presence was injected to make me think it's that and don't question this
Yep.
abduction experience.
Yes. Yes. And I want to talk a little bit about what the sleep paralysis abduction experience is because it's much different than the UFO. But I do just want to say that as you were talking, that kind of cracked me up because whenever I think about sleep paralysis, I have a very American idea in my mind of people like screaming and thrashing about. And I just got a picture of like a British person having sleep paralysis and going, "Oh, that was
With a
frightening.
cup of tea.
Oh, that was frightening."
A terrible fright. No, I know I was going, shit! Like that sort of
Okay,
thing.
okay, okay.
But
Oh, I'm glad to know you guys can get excited. Oh,
yes, we
I,
can.
I, I have such a prestigious view of you all.
That's very
Um,
kind of you, but we are not all like that.
well, good, because it's fun kind of being on this side of it too.
We're just you with different accents.
Oh, a better accents.
No, no, not always. Do you know what the accent I love is always the American twang, like the South and that,
Oh,
y'all
yes.
and them
Oh,
sort of ones.
yes.
They're amazing to us.
Yes, absolutely.
Which ones do you like? Just our posh one, do you?
Oh, not necessarily the posh. The posh is the one that I can understand the best, but I'm kind of
What about my accent? What do you think that is?
oh, I love it. I love it. I'll tell you this.
Mm.
The Brits like the Southern accent, which is the one that gets the least amount of respect in America. They're the ones that sound all
Hmm.
educated and whatever. So they're comical to us, unfortunately. Um, and likewise, it is very fun to listen to the Cockney.
Yeah, similar thing, isn't it? It's that assumed thing that you talk about earlier. You hear something or you see something and you assume intelligence based on it.
I know,
Completely the opposite, though, isn't it?
I know.
The
It
old
is.
read a book by its cover thing.
It is. I
Judge
remember
a book.
years ago reading online, and a guy was saying, "I'm so glad for the internet because in real life I have a Southern accent, and people I could list off rocket science and no one would give me the time of day." And so yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy, but also funny at the same time,
It
even though
it,
it
it
is not
is.
meant to be.
It is. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I do want to talk about the abduction
go for it.
with UFO abductees. We've heard the stories, and when they have memories of what has happened, they're talking about laboratories. It's very much like medical imagery. It's tables and it's surgical stuff and it's cloning and it's sperm and eggs and reproduction and pregnancies and things like that. So to just overly categorize it seems to be some sort of like, let's call it the medical wing of the astral realm. The astral realm, the sleep paralysis abductions, you're getting more of a classroom. It's more of a, let's say the UFO abductees are going to the astral hospital and the sleep paralysis abductees are going to the astral uni. They're going to the university at night. And that is by no means to categorize that people that have sleep paralysis are educated and intelligent, because I don't think they're getting a lot of useful, true information up there. It I wouldn't say that they're getting an education. I'd say they're getting a re-education, or they're getting groomed. But when you look at the people throughout history that unabashedly spoke on the record of astral projecting, and maybe they wouldn't use those terms, but that's what they were doing. You find some very influential characters, people that influenced medicine, religion, literature. You've got the Helena Blavatskys, you've got the H.P. Lovecrafts, the oh Frank Baum, the writer of Wizard of Oz. You've got Galen, the super surgeon of the 2nd century. You have people that to this day, 100 years later, 200 years later, are still major influencers in our culture, in our literature, our science, our medicine, our philosophy, a lot of the philosophy. And so the general religion, for lack of a better word, of the astral realm is theosophy. And it's been called different things through time. It was called different things before. Blavatsky called it theosophy, and it's being called different things now. But the theosophical realm is sort of pervasive in the astral realm. And so if you come from, the terrestrial ball, you've got a few major religions. So, you've got your Christianity, you've got your Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and, you've got your Judaism, you've got your main kind of categories. And so what's happening to a lot of people that are wittingly or unwittingly, intentionally or unintentionally going into the astral realm, whether they have memory of it or not, they're coming back with a transformed mind as to what reality is, what is, where are we really living, who's really in charge, who really made this place, where are we all going, what's our destiny as mankind, what is my true potential as a human being? Is it to just bear fruits of the spirit and be loving to other people, or am I actually going to transform into a god myself? And so it is a grooming out of the Judeo-Christian mindset into this theosophical Blavatsky sort of concept. And we're seeing evidences of that online now with a lot of the fringe information. And even though I don't have evidence of it, I'm going to bet you that there's at least a percentage of people putting that content out that have gotten their information directly from the astral realm. And I eat it up, Paul. I love it. I'm always listening to the stuff about, the mud floods and the, Atlantis and all that. I love it all. I don't know what all of it is true and what of it isn't, but it's like a train wreck. I can't stop looking at it. Like
It's good for the mind anyway.
It is. I mean, it's fascinating. And especially as someone who was raised in the Christian church starting in the 1970s, because it was a very different atmosphere and a very different world back then in the 70s. Things were very narrow. And if you even asked a question, your hand was slapped. And for me, it's not even if something is true or false, or it can be proven true or not proven true. Like when I hear things about, like, let's just take the mud floods, for example. What if there was something before in the beginning? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But what if there's something before that? Because if the Bible is a record of the epoch of time we're living in right now, we don't need to know what came before. It's none of our business. Maybe they were humans, maybe they weren't, maybe there was something there, maybe there wasn't. But we really limit ourselves when the stand becomes, in the beginning was the very beginning of all things. Nothing came before it. We can't even consider it. Don't ask the question. It's blasphemous. You're somehow going to pull Jenga pieces out where God is no longer going to be God anymore. If you start asking those questions, a lot of fear gets raised up. But the fact of the matter is, in the beginning simply means in the beginning of our experience. If you look at a Tolkien approach, Tolkien talked about, Middle Earth, they were already in another iteration, because in the time before, the elves ruled, and the scepter of power had passed out of their hands. And by the end of Return of the King, Aragorn was taking the scepter. It was the age of Aquarius, the age of man. Now man was going to rule the earth. Now man had the scepter. And so is there something to the idea that in the beginning is telling the story from the beginning of what's relevant to us? Because we can't even figure out what's happened in our own epoch. And so it's going to be very confusing if you start diluting our history with someone else's history. But is it really blasphemous or dangerous or even scary to just ask the question, okay, we start out with a planet that's in darkness and chaos. It's a void. But then we read elsewhere in scripture where it says that God is a God of order. So are you telling me that he created something chaotic? Or are you telling me that he created something orderly and it got destroyed? So then he came down to the chaos and reformed it, reconstituted it. And even the Hebrew in that verse, the tohu bohu, even the Hebrew leaves it open that this could be a reforming rather than an initial creation. But I think Christians get nervous about that too, because that's what Satan does. Satan can't create. He can't create ex nihilo. And so now you have a creator who's creating out of something that was already there. And so everyone gets up in arms. And I just say, hey, look, God doesn't need a bunch of stupid human beings defending his character. Like, we can ask the questions. And if at the end of the discussion we conclude, that's a dead end, that's stupid. Now, then, but at least you've had the discussion. And so that's kind of the way that I feel with a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about with sleep paralysis. I'm not sitting here chiseling this stuff on tablets and putting it in an ark and carrying it around in a wilderness, right? What I'm telling you is I've had this experience for over 40 years. I've talked now to hundreds of other people who have had the experience. I've done research. I have made a lot of observations during my experiences. And with the information that we have available to us today in September 2024, here are some of my musings.
Okay.
Now, a year from now, when we have even more information, I might have new musings that outdate or outmode the things I'm telling you today, because that's the nature of being alive on this planet. Like,
I'm
it's
sorry,
ever.
this is a hard coded video. You have to stick to this forever. That's it. That's just science.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So it's really tough. It's like pinning Jello to the wall, right? I can't remember what you guys call Jello.
Jelly.
Is it jelly? Jelly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yes. It's like pinning it to the wall.
You call
Uh,
jelly jam. No, you call our jam jelly, don't you?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's weird.
I
Anyway.
know. Totally weird. Totally weird. I will say the first time that I was in Ireland, we got jelly and it was orange. And so you know how you put like fruit in it, so like and it matches like the jelly. So if we had an orange jelly, there'd be like little mandarin oranges or something in it. And we got this beautiful little jelly bowl and it was orange and it had carrot slices in it. And I was like, oh, vegetables?
Yeah,
And
that's weird.
it blew my mind.
Yeah, that is odd, by the way.
Yeah.
But that you can't trust Irish people. They're very odd. No, I'm joking. I love Irish people.
I do too. I do. Oh man, I love Ireland. But yes, I had my first carrot in encrusted jelly there. And it was good. I ate it with joy. But yeah, so this stuff, all we can do is speculate. And I think we're into a generation now where talking about something, it isn't necessarily about pinning down the absolute definitive interdimensional truth of all time. It's the absolute joy of discovery and the joy of the discussion. And I'm seeing with the younger generations, they are more excited and passionate about asking questions than previous generations who became paralyzed and terrified by them. Uh, I hope we're entering into an era, even with the older generations, where we can stop looking at questions as a threat to everything we believe in.
Well, no, they're part of the scientific process, are they not? Or the
Yeah.
logical process. You don't learn
Hmm.
without a question. So, to pin you down then, even though you don't want to, muse away and tell me what you think it is. Is it an attack and that the astral thing is all a lie and that that religion and God here is the truth? Or where are you thinking? Where are you
Yeah.
going?
So I have no problem telling you point blank how I feel. It's
Hmm.
just that I don't have I have nuanced answers. And it's not, I'm not trying to do like a matrix thing and like ease my way out of it here, but it's more complicated than black and white. So I prefer to say that there is a spiritual element to it rather than demonic. And I'll tell you why. If you want to go with the textbook definition of a demon, and even the church historically has had this wrong. Um, Demons aren't the same thing as fallen angels. They're not angels. Demons aren't the watchers. The watchers are mentioned in the book of Daniel and the book of Genesis. They're these high ranking type of angel. They were mediators between the third heaven and earth. They helped mankind learn the soil and planting, and they were kind of like our helpers, pre-Holy Spirit kind of thing, I guess. And so demons aren't watchers. And we learn in Ephesians 6:12, several different types of entities are mentioned. We've got archons and principalities and spiritual forces of wickedness and dark forces in the heavenlies. And so there's at least four different ranks of beings in the heavenly places in Ephesians 6:12. So the textbook definition, if you go to the Dead Sea Scrolls and rabbinic literature, is that the demons, it is believed, were the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim that were destroyed in the flood, that Noah's flood. So you have watchers, you have 200 watchers that come down Mount Hermon. They intermingle with the human women. They give birth to the demigods. We've got the hybrids. We've got now these giants where their fathers were the watchers, angelic, immortal beings from the spirit realm, and the mothers were terrestrial human beings with human DNA. So they are these hybrids that are part immortal through their father, but they have the mitochondria DNA of the mother. So what happens when they face physical death? Their physical body dies, the terrestrial part of their family dies, but the genetics that come from the spirit realm are immortal. So the spirit then becomes disembodied. And we can go into all the stories in the New Testament where Jesus is casting demons into the pigs and things like these things always need a host. They always want to be inside of something. And so when they were being cast out of the demoniacs, they wanted to go into the pigs. And so uh, if you look at demons being disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, we have creatures now that are bound to the terrestrial realm. They don't go to heaven, they don't go to hell, they don't have bodies, they're not in the abyss. They're bound. So when you start talking about the shadow man and the hat man and the shadows and all this kind of stuff, are those demons? Could those be the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim? Yes, I think that's a very likely answer. And one of the reasons that I find it likely, it's not because, oh, they're scary or, no, not everything that we see on planet Earth that's terrifying is a demon. But I think that the reason why we in the physical, when we wake up, like when we see things wide awake that are creature-like or being-like, I do tend to think, I'm not talking about the grays, but I tend to think that the reason why we're able to see them is because they are partly by nature terrestrial. This is their home as well, so to speak. And so the reason we can't see these other things until we're in the astrals, because that's where they live, that's their home. So we see them when they're there. So I could go so nuanced, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit trail, but basically I do think that in general, there's always outliers. In general, these things we're seeing in our bedroom at night, quite possibly something demonic. Now, when we're in the astral realm, it's different. Then we're seeing the we have names for them, and then the Bible has names for them. We call them spirit guides and ascended masters and higher and lower vibrational beings, and there's probably no end to the cast of characters. But in Ephesians 6:12, the heavenly places, for Christians out there that get squeamish when we talk about the astral realm is actually in Ephesians 6:12. When you go to the places in the New Testament where people saw the throne room of God, John, Paul, they are describing they're using a Greek word that does not correlate with the Greek word used in Ephesians 6:12. There's a astral heavenly place, and there's a throne room of God heavenly place. And so when Paul and John are having visions of heaven and they're seeing God sitting upon the throne with the seraphim, that's not the same place that's being described in Ephesians 6:12, because Ephesians 6:12 is using a different Greek word, epuranius. And so we know, despite what we're hearing online, we know, if you're going to look at it through, I should say, if you accept the biblical perspective, Ephesians 6:12 is flat out telling us that enemies of mankind live in the high places, because it starts out by saying our battle is not against flesh and blood. In other words, we're warring with each other. Men and women are fighting, you know, black and white are fighting, gay and straight are fighting. We think the battle's against flesh and blood, and we have all of these divisions, and we're spending, all this time fighting with each other. But what the writer of Ephesians, Paul, is saying is, you're wasting all your time fighting with all your fellow human brothers and sisters. The real war, it's not horizontal, it's vertical. The battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and archons and powers of darkness and spiritual forces in the high places, which some translations say heavenly places, which I think is confusing, because anytime, an English speaker sees the word heaven, they think heaven. But the older translations say high places, which you should connect with the Old Testament idea of a high place was where all the people went to worship the idols, the false gods, the demons. And so the text is telling us flat out that the astral realm, the second heaven, this dimension that hovers between earth and the actual throne room of God, is filled with riffraff. And I know that this contradicts what we're hearing from the New Age. It's that, well, if you're in the lowest region of the astral, you're going to get the riffraff and the lower vibrational beings. And if you just get higher than that, you'll get into all the good stuff. I personally think that that's a breadcrumb trail deeper into the woods. That would be like us saying, okay, if you've got a deep, dark woods at night, and there's all sorts of animals that, if you stay on the periphery, you're not safe. But if you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the woods, then you'll find the good stuff. It doesn't make sense to the way we perceive danger here on Earth, that if you get deeper and deeper into something, you're going to get to the good stuff. The hidden stuff, the occult stuff, what's hidden, they're usually hiding for a reason. And so I think we have to be really careful when we play around with things that we don't really understand. This is an analogy I've used numerous times. If I'm a woman and I go into a relationship with a man, assuming he thinks and perceives the world exactly the way I do, there's going to be problems. And there are problems. Men and women can't even figure each other out. We're living on the same planet. We have all the same experiences. We eat food and we go to movies, and yet try to figure out the person living in the house with you, right? It's hard enough figuring out someone you are intimately acquainted with. Now expand that metaphor to world travel. I, as a dumb American, am going to go to another country where they don't speak my language. I have no idea what parts of town I should be in and what parts of town I shouldn't be in. I don't know where the gang activity is. I don't know what these people think about Americans. I don't know if all of the hand gestures and turns of phrases that I have are going to be taken the same way that they're taken here in America. I mean, even just the difference in what's considered to be crude swear words, even just between America and England. I mean, we're related. We're ancestors of each other. We have the same language, and there's words that will get bleeped off of our televisions that are just said all the time on television over in the UK, like I've heard the F word, like they drop it like it's nothing. Over here, that's like the top of the totem pole. Whereas an American can say bloody and it means nothing to us. And so what I try to tell people is, if you go to another country without a guide, you get yourself sick, or you could get yourself killed. You could get yourself deported. You could get yourself put into prison. It's very dangerous. And so the idea of leaving your body and traveling around in another dimension and just using your gut and your emotions and your feelings to determine whether or not something up there is trustworthy or not, just because it tells you it is extremely dangerous. And even if you have a spirit guide, you have to question, what makes me think that I've got this figured out? What makes me think that I'm safe? Because what most human beings do to their detriment, I mean, let's just use the metaphor of marriage again. How many people got into marriages with the love of their life to realize it was an absolute disaster or that it wasn't safe? But it was initially based on, this person makes me feel really good. I love being in their presence. They say all the right things. And
And then
so
you find out they're a murderer with that succinylcholine stuff. Yeah,
exactly. You open up their nightstand drawer and it's just
packed for.
hypodermic needles and succinylcholine.
Yeah, I'm gonna go looking for that in Tiff's drawers. She's bound to have some. I know she is.
That's right. That's right. With a to-do list, like
And it's
tonight.
just me, my name loads of times. Yeah.
I love it.
So,
Oh,
what you're alluding to is that even heaven or the heavens or the high place or whatever might not be safe and it might not be what we think it is.
yeah.
So, is
Yeah.
the Bible lying then?
Um, I don't think so. But I think a lot of people, they're not looking into, they're reading it on the surface, and they're just reading a little modern English translation. They're not delving into what the original language is really like. Koine Greek is a very multi-layered, huge language. And it's not as nuanced as the classical Greek. Koine Greek was it was the Greek of the people. We were talking earlier about the Southern twang and the Cockney. The Koine Greek was the Southern twang of the Hellenistic age. It was the people that didn't have the highfalutin classical Greek. Um, if we understood the context and the culture of the times, the Bible written in Greek would probably come off almost hilarious to us. It would probably sound like the people on the street that have all their slang terms and all of that. But even in its state, Koine Greek is far more nuanced than the English. There's different parts of speech that cover things like we have past, present, and future, and they have, like, I think, 5 tenses. They have a past, present, a future. They have one that's like a now and then. It's very nuanced, and so
Mm.
if you don't understand the pronouns and things, you're going to get much different meanings out of it, and there's going to be confusion. And so I think the Bible is very clear that the high places of Ephesians 6:12 is a place where a bunch of people that hate humanity hang out, but that heavenly realm is not the heavenly realm where God is sitting on his throne and there's seraphim flying around, and that's not the same place that John saw when he wrote the book of Revelation. So, but you're not going to know that unless you dive into it. And there is a divide with our understanding of the scriptures when we just read the English, because we are now thousands of years separated from the original writings. So there's culture, history, language, geography. We're separated from that stuff. And
Intention, context, everything.
everything, yes, yeah. And I could give you great examples of that would just give you chills and make the Bible look really exciting, which, it's unfortunate that a lot of modern preaching has kind of stripped the Bible of the supernatural, and it's kind of dumbed it down, and it's sort of made it into one of the most boring books on the planet. But if you actually get it with the culture, the context, the history, the language, and the geography, and you have all of those facets of the diamond when you're reading it, and other things are coming to light, it actually becomes an extremely exciting yarn.
Do you know what? When I was speaking to L.A. Marzulli, and I know you know who he is because I
Yep.
think he does your book, or
Yes.
at least his company does.
Yep.
He calls it the supernatural guidebook, which I'd never heard before, and I like that phrase, right?
Hmm.
I'm not into the Bible in any way, shape, or form, right? I have opinions of what I think it is, but I'm not versed, I'm not into it, so how do I know? I'm colouring my own bias. Imagine, I'm not saying imagine, let's just assume that it is 100% truth.
Yeah.
Why have I dismissed it? So I
Mm.
can't dismiss it, even though part of me thinks I should. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a hard
Yeah.
thing because it ultimately goes back to this sleep paralysis and what you think of the heavens. How do I know what is true? I'll never know. So where should I put my coins? What am I betting on?
I know. We can go 2000 years into the past. We'll get in our little time machine. We'll go back to the first century and we'll go to Pontius Pilate, who was probably highly educated, leader. And what's the one thing that we have documented in scripture that he's standing in front of allegedly the Son of God, the guy who has every answer in the universe, and his question is, what is truth?
Mm.
That's what he says. And depending
And
on
what
the
was the
past,
answer? What was the answer to that?
it was left unanswered.
So do you know the answer yourself?
Well,
Because I'd like to
this,
know.
this is where I will get accused of circular logic, and I own it because, I'm speaking out of the overflow of my worldview. But several chapters before that moment, Jesus declared to his disciples, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so the bizarre, brilliant, chilling paradox of Pilate asking Jesus what is truth is that
And
the
it was
answer
stood in
was
front
right.
of him.
It was
Mm.
standing in front of him. And that's why it went unanswered. And but that's circular logic. Well, you're telling me to believe the Bible because the Bible says it. And I get that. I know.
Mm.
And there's a verse in scripture that kind of goes against the little rainbows, puppies, glitter, popsicle Christianity that we have in large portions of America right now. It says to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. So it's not like, hey, pray a prayer. Now it's a party. Jesus is your best friend. The Bible is not cavalier about that pursuit of truth. And I think the problem right now is not so much that the truth isn't available or that we do or don't want it. It's that we're human beings and we kind of default to the most base of desires on a daily basis. And we invest our time and our mind and our thoughts and our energy in the things that are interesting and fulfilling to us in the here and now. And a pursuit of truth is extremely difficult. It's a lifelong pursuit. I mean, just look at Plato and Socrates, look at the Greek traditions. They spent their whole lives pursuing knowledge. And it is a lifelong, sober minded pursuit that means we would have to set aside other more easy, fun things to pursue it. And so I don't think it's that the truth can't be found or that it's that we don't want it. It's just, it's the tyranny of the urgent. And when we wake up every day, we're thinking about our coffee and we're thinking about what we're going to do today. And we're thinking about how much work we can get out of and what 4 hours of television we're going to watch at night. And when we get to the end of the day, are we going to go to Netflix or are you honestly going to open up your Bible and study it and prayerfully the ask God to reveal himself to us? And are we going to make that investment of time? And so I do think truth is out there, but it's kind of like, let's compare this. I like metaphors. I like analogies. Let's compare it to, let's say I am an archaeologist and I want to be the one that uncovers the fill in the blank. Okay, I'm looking for some buried ancient city that hasn't been found. And I have much to gain if I'm the one that finds it. I make a name for myself. I get tenor. I get all of the money and the grants for my next project. I get to write articles and like I will have prestige and fulfillment in life. Okay, I'm an archaeologist. I want to find this lost city. Think about the investment of time and money. Think of the discouragement. Think of the heat of the desert that you have to be out sweating in every day. Think of the meals that you're giving up because you're out in the desert digging while there's still daylight. And one must have an unyielding passion because for most people, as soon as they realize how hot it is in the desert and how hard it is to take a little shovel and dig through rocky soil, uh, they're going to give up because the reality is not going to be as romantic as them receiving their Nobel Peace Prize, right? So the
Hmm.
average person is going to abandon the pursuit because it's too hard. I mean, here's another analogy. I'm a treasure hunter. Okay, I can be on the beach with a metal detector and I can maybe find some coins and maybe some little shards of gold if I'm lucky. I'll find things at a pawn shop. Maybe I can get a few bucks for it. So, what kind of treasure hunter do I want to be? Do I want to be the guy on the beach with the metal detector who gets some shiny things and occasionally gets a payoff? Or do I want to be the one that dives into the water and finds the sunken treasure that's worth millions? Well, to dive for the treasure, you're now no longer getting the sun on your back. You're in the water. It's cold. The deeper you go, the colder it gets, the darker it gets, the scarier it gets, the harder to breathe it gets, the more your life is threatened. Because if your oxygen, anything goes wrong with your equipment or a predator comes, or if you get tangled up in something, uh, if you're too deep, the pressure can collapse your lungs. It's also lonelier because there's going to be a lot of people that want to hunt for stuff on the beach with you where the sun is shining. Not a lot of people want to go with you to the deeper places. So it's the pursuit of treasure is also a lonely venture because there's a lot of people that are going to be excited about the vision, but as soon as it gets hard, they're going to abandon. And so if we look at our pursuit of truth as if it's a treasure, we have to understand that there is a massive amount of sacrifice of time and reputation, finances, etc. It and the only people that are ever going to truly lay their hands on the treasure are the people that relentlessly invest their entire life in it and never give up. Their whole life begins to revolve around nothing but finding this thing. It becomes an obsession for them. And so I think the reason that most people don't find truth, it's not because it's not available or it's not able to be found. I think that if we are extremely honest with ourselves, we aren't really looking for it.
It's what you get put in, you get out. It's that old adage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I'm with you on that. Although I do think it's a double-edged sword in that truth, that's the thing, can never be captured because it's a never-ending quest. There's more to
Yeah.
find. There's more to,
Yeah.
it's not a,
We,
there's your answer in black and white.
yeah. We will always only have a portion of it.
Yeah.
And I think, even if you want to go to the religious end of it, everyone's always cavalierly talking about, well, when I get to heaven, I'm going straight to the information booth and I'm going to ask God why this, why that, and it's like, okay, good luck. But I would
There's a
like to
long
think
queue there, that's the thing.
it's a long queue, but I would like to think that even in heaven, we're never, if God gave us the full download, we'd be God. There's
That's
always going
true.
to be a separation. There's always going to be a mystery. There's always going to be discovery. And for me, heaven's not going to be heaven for me if I get up there and he installs a chip in my brain and everything's downloaded. We as human beings, we're still going to be, in essence, who we are. We're going to be given new terrestrial bodies. We have physical bodies. And part of what makes life intriguing to us is it's a quest. We're always discovering things like for those of us that like learning, when you learn something new or you're able to connect dots, it's exhilarating. And I hope we don't just sit up there where Jesus is sitting in a chair with a storybook reading us stories. Like I hope that it's an interactive discussion where people are all bringing to the table the things on earth that they had a passion for, and we're all sharing information. It's just this joyous exchange of discovery. Like I hope heaven's not just everybody sitting around, and I
Yeah,
don't
that would
think
be
that
dull.
that
Yeah,
would be very dull.
very dull. Um, Very interesting, and I could branch off a load more questions for there, but I'm conscious of time and just a few more bits I want to get through. Have you got a copy of your book handy?
I do. Let me grab it. Hold on. Glad I had pants on.
How do you know I have? I might. um, the reason I asked you to, if you had it handy, is obviously you could show it off, and then we can talk about where you get it, and also what drove you to write it. Because I know you've got a lot of information, and your experiences probably formed the basis. But then you still had to be the person, like we talked about in the Search for Truth, that actually did the work to put it out. So let's talk about where to get it, what drove you to write it.
All right. Is this going to show backwards? I never know.
No, that's perfect. I can see it. It's
Awesome.
commented into it. No, that's fine. I can see it.
They only come out at night, exposing the dark weapon of sleep paralysis. It is available at lamarzulli.net. If you go to my website, vickijoyanderson.com, you can click on the book, but it's just going to take you to LA's site for that particular order. Um, Man, why did I write this book?
Yeah.
It was kind of a happy accident. It organically happened. I certainly never set out to do it. What happened was I started doing ministry with Tom Dunn. He's a guy here in the States who has uh, a ministry, I guess, for lack of a better word, where he really delves into like occult crime, ritual abuse, things like that, and exposing of that kind of stuff. And so he started up a news website called realdarknews.com. And it started out where it was an exposing of here's all the news stories that actually is probably occult crime, but they're not telling you that. And so, but there's other things too, like people are writing about like woo and fringe and stuff like that. And so he was looking for writers, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing because people aren't often looking for writers. And so I got in touch with them. And so they said, well, what are some of the stuff you've experienced or that you're interested in? And I can't remember the litany of things I told them, but I must have said sleep paralysis in there at some point because I got an email saying, okay, why don't you write a sample article on sleep paralysis? And I'm like, oh, cool. This will be so easy. And when I sat down to actually write it, I realized there's a vast world of difference between experiencing something and knowing what it is.
Mm.
And I don't want to just write an article where I'm like, this one time I woke up and and I didn't want to write an article where I was just copy pasting what everyone else was writing because I didn't think what everyone else was writing was necessarily helpful. And I don't know about over there on your side of the pond, but when I was in elementary school and we were learning how to write papers, we were brought to the school library. We picked a topic out of a World Book encyclopedia and we rewrote the article in our own words so that it wouldn't be plagiarism, right? Well, that's not right. It's not writing. That's just
Mm.
copy pasting. And so I don't know that I was really taught to research or come to new conclusions in school. I was just taught to look at all the information that's already out there and rearrange it. And so I realized, well, I'm in a little bit of a quandary now because even though I've experienced this my whole life, I don't know that I could really tell anybody what it is or who's involved or why am I being targeted. And I thought, well, that was a humbling moment when you think you know everything and you realize you know
You know
nothing.
nothing. Yeah, or very small amount. Yeah.
So it took me several weeks to bang out the article, and it ended up being two articles. And after the articles got published and were put on the website, I was up at a family cabin a couple months later, and I was just bored. I didn't have anything to do. It was raining out, and I was just like, well, what do I do? And I guess because I'm sort of a nerd, I was like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to like write a mock book proposal?
Yeah, wouldn't it be fun? Yeah, but you're an author, you're a writer,
Oh,
so it would be for you.
That sounds so lame saying that out loud. Oh my gosh. Oh, but anyway, um, I didn't have any intention of doing anything with it. I just thought, oh yeah, this would be cool. And so I don't even know if you have to write book proposals anymore. Back in the 70s, you had it was an ordeal. You'd have the cover page and then you'd have a mock table of contents, and then you'd have like a mock all the chapters. Like you'd have a chapter summary and then you'd have an excerpt. And so I ended up banging out this book proposal if I was to write a book on sleep paralysis. And I was alarmed as I read through it. I'm like, well, this would actually be a really cool book. And I didn't actually ask my question, could you actually write this book? I'm saying like, oh, like we could talk about this and that and all this stuff like over my head. And so shortly after that, I had gone to a couple conferences and I made 8 copies of this book proposal and I handed it out to 8 different influencers, L.A. Marzulli being one of them. Now, I didn't actually say, will you publish the book? I think my ask was really basic. It was like, um, would you write an endorsement for the back cover? Or do you know anyone in the publishing world or whatever? So it was, no one was more surprised on the planet than me when L.A. Marzulli called me on the phone and said, I'm going to publish this. And I was like, super excited for about 20 minutes. And then I looked at the proposal and I was like, I got to write this.
Yeah, not the work.
I'm like, oh no, what have I done? And I had some genuine anxiety. Like, can I produce this? Can I put my money where my mouth is here? And it took me a year to write the book. And some of that is because I was, I was researching. And some of it was just so heavy that my body and my energy level was sort of going through the process with me. And there was like chapter 4, especially all on the vampirism and the threshold covenants. And it was so kind of dark and heavy that it took me many months to even just get through that chapter. I'd get up to write and my whole body would just like have this weight and oppression on it. There was aspects of it that was difficult to write. So I write this book and I just never in a million years. I've self-published so many books before, and you throw it on Amazon, and your mom and your dad and a couple friends buy it, and it goes into oblivion. And
I know that one.
yeah, yeah. So I was like, I wasn't, expecting too much, and which I mean, that's not to say that riding on the coattails of L.A. Marzulli isn't going to help a person, but I think even that I was somewhat naive about, and so I had gotten a publicist and I was basically kind of told like, okay, you're going to do maybe 3 podcasts a week for 3 months. And as an introvert, I was like, whoa, that's a lot, but 3 months, I could do it. I can do it for 3 months. And oh my gosh, Paul, I, I'm 3 years into this and it, I'm talking, yeah, a minimum three a week. I cannot believe the interest for this topic. I can't believe how many people have experienced this. I can't believe how relevant this is. If I was going to sit down with a crystal ball, a fortune teller, a time traveler, and a deck of tarot cards, I could not have aligned the planets better to have written a book on this topic at this time. I never could have predicted the intrigue. And I have gotten to speak. This is one thing as a Christian who spent most of her entire life just dealing with other Christians. This has also opened up a world to me where I get to talk to people who don't just think and believe and agree with everything I say. And I'm getting to hear other people's perspectives and mindsets and their questions and their experiences. And it has just been blowing my mind. I have met some of the coolest people. It's just been one of the most unexpected happy surprises of my life, getting to be involved in this community, this podcast community. Um, it's just been amazing. So never in a million years did I think I was going to ever, publicly talk about sleep paralysis because it's very personal because like we were talking at the beginning, you can't talk about sleep paralysis without really talking about a lot of really personal things in your life that people could easily be stand in judgment of if they
Mm.
wished. And I've just been alarmed that instead of criticism or division, that this is such a common experience that people are more interested in getting to the bottom of it than they are in judging how or why you've had it your whole life.
Exactly. I think it's an endlessly fascinating topic, and it's so unknown. There's no answers really.
Yeah.
That's why so many people are intrigued. So, well done you for writing it. And I love talking about things like this. So thank you ever so much for coming on again. We are now going to take a sideways journey through a sort of astral travel portal. Koit Zone! In the Koit Zone, I ask you strange questions.
Okay.
Not that I haven't already, but just answer best you can. First one, what are your favourite sweets or chocolate? We'll start with an easy one.
Oh gosh. Now's the part where everyone realizes I'm a American that eats crappy genetically modified garbage. Because I should say something like Swiss chocolate.
You're not going to say
But
Hershey's drops or anything, are you?
yeah, like Hershey Kiss. No, if we're going with chocolate, it would be anything dark chocolate sea salt caramel.
Okay.
Yes.
And
But
sweets?
typically if I'm going to do sweets, I will migrate towards uh sour. Like fruit sour kind of stuff. So it'll be like
Mm,
sour Skittles, Sour Patch Kids.
they make you go
Um
and all that stuff.
yeah, I like the sour Skittles and stuff like that. I try to stay off that, but I do enjoy a good, oh man, you put me on a road trip and you get me in a gas station and there's no telling what's going to
And
happen.
you're coming out with packets of nerds, the sour ones,
Oh,
yeah?
oh, I love nerds. Oh yes.
Yeah, me
Oh
too. They're
yes.
lush.
Thank you. I knew I was forgetting one.
Yeah, they're beautiful, those things.
Mhm.
If not quite expensive in England to buy them because they have a whole American like bit in our stores.
Oh,
But if you have imported stuff, it's a shed load more expensive. But hey ho,
okay.
is quite an apt one. What was your last nightmare?
Oh, um, oh gosh, that's a good one. Um, you'd think I can remember. I'm entering into a phase where I'm not remembering a lot of my dreams. The last nightmare that I can really think of, because here's the thing, I have a lot of astral stuff still, Paul. I haven't shook that. And so I know I have a lot of that, but I can't really quantify that as scary. It's not scary. It's
Mm.
just you wake up tired and sort of discombobulated. But the last nightmare I had where I woke up absolutely out of my skin was last year. And I actually chronicle the whole entire dream in detail on, I think the episode is called Dreamscape Warfare on the Confessionals. I did that this year in March, but it was an astral dream, and I was pulled into a theater-like situation, and me and several other girls were lined up in front of empty thrones, ancient medieval-looking thrones. They were empty, and we were told that there was like two or three of us in line in front of five of these thrones, and we were told that we were all competing for that chair, and that we were to go up to the chair and make three vows to the chair. And then the rule was you can't use the word I or we. Now, this is the part in the dream where I went lucid because here's me in the dream going, well, that's really specific. That's odd. And then a fear overcame me, and a voice in my head said, get out of here as soon as you can. And that freaked me out. So the deal was that we're competing for this chair, and if you make the right three vows, you'll get to sit in this chair and like rule the world. I don't know. I'm not sure. But and there's this audience there that was all shadow people. And then there was like a witch looking woman, the cliche long black hair kind of thing, right? And so I was second in line in front of this first chair, and the girl in front of me, I was scared because I wasn't going to make the vows and I thought we had to say them out loud. But I realized after all the first girls in line went that they were all doing it in their head. I'm like, oh, thank God, I can get out of this now. So I get up to the chair and I close my eyes and I just say, I do not consent. And nothing happens. And I'm like, cool, I'm the smartest person in the room, And so I turn around and I walk past the witch and I made eye contact with her and she smiled at me in approval. So I'm like, I can't believe how easy that was. So I get into this back room and with all the other girls who were finished. And I'm thinking in my head, well, that was easy. And as I turn around, a large orb manifests on the chair and it snakes through the air like a cannonball at alarming speed and gets me right in the gut and pushes me out through the wall, and I'm tumbling back and forth through interstellar space with this ball at my gut, and I'm terrified at this point, and I'm just saying, Jesus, 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 and nothing is working. And finally, at one point, after I must have said Jesus 100 times, it stopped me in midair. And I was kind of like rocking back and forth on it. And like, so I wasn't moving, but it was still there. And I was just hovering there. So then I said, I started quoting scripture and I said, no weapon formed against me will prosper. All those who rise against me will fall. I will not fear what the devil will bring me. I'm a servant of God. And then bang, I wake up because my dad is calling me on my phone at like 3 a.m. And I answer all discombobulated. I'm like, well, whatever. And then my dad's like, yeah, Vic, are you up? And he's just talking like it's noon. And I'm like, oh, what? And he's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, Vic, I didn't know it was 3 a.m. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And he hangs up, but it woke me up. It got me out of it. And so, like I said, I detail that at length with my varying conclusions on Dreamscape Warfare with Tony Merkel, the confessionals, if you want to hear the whole.
Oh, I definitely need to because I'd have a shed load more questions here. So I
I
would
know.
sidetrack this again for an hour. So I'll move on from that quickly. Here's a nice easy one. Do you have a favorite word?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. This is so stupid, but I love the word phantasmagorical.
Phantasmagorical. Do you know what? Here's a weird thing, and I shouldn't say this live on here, but I'm going to anyway. So
Good.
excuse me when I say this. I knew the first three letters of what you were going to say then. Because what came
Really?
into my head was Fanny, and I don't know why, but it did straight away. Fanny, right? And so that's weird that it's
Wow.
the same first three letters.
Is Fanny spelled Phanny?
No, F.
Okay.
Oh, is it that? Oh yeah, yeah. All right. So let's just say how it was said then.
Dang
How
it. You're the keeper of the English language.
I do apologize.
I am just the student.
That was a slap the head moment. Let's move on from that. Do you have a favorite film?
I do. So I have like every American has a favorite film that they like don't want to tell you about because it's like the stupidest movie in the world. Like it's some like dumb, like just hilarity kind of a movie. So, we all have our like
Hmm.
Anchorman or, something like that, right? But I think if there was a movie that I could watch over and over and over again, if I could emotionally handle it, it would have to be Braveheart.
Amazing.
Love
I've
it.
not heard anyone say that yet. By the way, you're the
Oh,
first
I
person to
love
say
it.
that.
It's so beautifully written. And ironically, I got to tell everybody this because it's just super
Go for
cool
it.
synchronicity. Many years ago, before Braveheart came out and I had seen it, I was taking all my lit credits in college at Stirling University in Scotland. And we would take walks up to the Wallace Monument, and the Scottish students, my friends, would tell me the story of William Wallace, and I didn't know what the heck they were talking about. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then Braveheart comes out, and I'm like, no way. This is right where I was. This is right where I was. And it's funny that how I even wound up going to Stirling University because there was other schools that I was looking at. I just knew that I wanted to take my lit credits in the UK. And so years after that, I found out that the very first time Anderson, Anderson, which is my last name,
Mhm.
the very first time it shows up in written history is the Anderson clan showed up to fight the Battle of Stirling Bridge with William Wallace.
There you go. So it's
I thought
all
that was
synchronicities. Yeah, yeah,
it
that's cool.
totally, totally.
Amazing. Cool. If offered a ticket to go into space, would you take it?
Oh, I want to crack a joke so bad right now.
Go for it.
Oh, what if the spaceship hits the firmament?
I thought, were you doing the whole flat Earth thing? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, you can't ask a conspiracy theorist
No,
that
that's
question.
true.
It makes no sense to them. You've just muddled my brain. No, going to space. I don't know. Maybe not. I'd rather go back in time. If it was a spaceship that took me back in time, I would definitely do that.
I didn't ask you about a spaceship going back in time, I'm afraid. So this was just to go into space. You have failed the test.
You know what? This is so funny. It's not that I wouldn't want to see that, but I'm an introvert that's constantly um, avoiding social gatherings and things that are taking me away from things. And I think, when you go into deep space and then you come back and you're like 10 years older, like I'm thinking like, okay, I don't want to do that. I got stuff to do.
That's fair enough. Nice that you're thinking about the bigger picture, isn't it? That's the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
is there a nice next one? You have to perform for royalty.
Uh-oh.
What performance are you putting on?
Oh gosh.
You can't get out. You have to perform for royalty. It's on pain of death.
I have to perform for royalty. Oh my gosh. That's an awesome question. I keep thinking like, okay, I'm on America's Got Talent and Simon Cowell is sitting there. See, I'm the type that would want to do something like ridiculous just to kind of make a mockery of the whole thing, but that's just to hide the fact that I have no talent.
That's fine then. That's the answer, isn't it? That's
I,
good.
I would I, I would have to go with the only thing I could do. I would have to take an acoustic guitar, bang out like something with like three chords and sing. But just to be divisive, I would probably sing something uh kind of that would not be appreciated just for
Something
fun.
rude or
Yeah, yeah,
inappropriate. Good on
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What animal do you most resonate with?
Oh gosh. Okay. I would love to be flattering here and say something regal. Like I love giraffes and things like that. But my spirit animal is definitely a sloth.
Do bugger all and a little shit
I,
once a month or something?
it's not even that I'm lazy because I'm not. But when I see, when I see pictures of the sloths with that look of absolute disgust and boredom on their face, just slowly trying to like get somewhere, that's kind of just how I feel like life is. I feel like it takes me 100 years to get somewhere that should have taken 10 minutes with all of and then the sloths are kind of like I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. Leave me alone. I can't be bothered. And I hate to say it because it's not flattering, but when I
It's
see a
funny though,
sloth,
isn't it?
when I see a sloth, I'm like, that's me, man. That's me.
Again, you're unique. I've never had that said to me before, so well
Very
played.
cool. Very cool.
What's the last meal you prepared?
Oh gosh. Does heating up something in the microwave count?
Yeah.
Um, I'm legitimately trying to remember what I had for dinner last night. I can't even remember. I seriously,
Memorable then, yeah. It's an amazing
yesterday was
meal.
off the charts. Um but the last time I made an effort to like cook something for my dad, he was really hungry for my mom's goulash. My mom has passed away. And so I I think the last thing that I actually put a little bit of TLC into is I made a goulash and I actually added it's spices, which is something, let me explain for the British listeners. Just kidding.
You saying we do bland food? Is that what you're getting at? The cheek. We spawned your country. I'm jesting.
Oh man.
It's true though. And I am one of those people that like bland food, by the way. I don't do spice.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
That's why I said I did it special for my dad. Because if you didn't put salt, if you just handed me noodles with nothing on it, I would love every minute of it. I could care less.
Yeah, I'm the same. I love it. Basic. Um,
Yep.
two more here. Best ever ride you've been on.
Like an amusement park ride.
You can answer that how you see fit. It could be amusement, or it could be something
Ooh.
else.
All right. I'm trying to be original. Like, hey, have I ever been in like a cool sports car or something? Hmm.
Mm.
I do like rides. I do like the scary rides. The scarier, the better. This is just so white trash, but there's this ride, usually at county and state fairs. They look like they're 100 years old, and why the little cars don't go flying off and killing people every time you go on it is beyond me. It's called the Zipper, and it's like a merry-go-round or what's that thing called? It it goes like this, like on a bike chain, but then the cars are violently flipping as you're going the opposite
Mm.
direction. But I also live very close to Silver Dollar City, which is like an 1800s themed amusement park in the Ozarks. And they have some amazing roller coasters. There's one called the Time Traveler, and I love that one. It's a backwards one that shoots you down a 90-degree angle, and it's pretty fun.
Quality. I don't know that one. I will look that up because I love a good theme park ride. So time traveler in the Ozarks. I'll find that. Last question in the Koit zone before we wrap up. You find a remote control that allows you to enter the universe of the film or TV show that you're watching.
Oh,
Which show is it you wish to be transported into or film?
oh gosh. Definitely not Braveheart. I'm
No.
gonna steer clear. Um, oh, this is hard because I don't watch a lot of TV and movies. And so anything I say is going to be really outdated.
It's okay.
Oh gosh. This is the kind of thing where you answer and then, 3 hours later you're like, oh, I should have said this or that. I think I would want to be transported somewhere completely ridiculous where I could carry on the shtick along with it. So if I went into something like Anchorman or The Office, where I just had a bunch of other ridiculous people and I could use that dry humor and just have this sort of like dual thing going on where I'm understanding and appreciating in my head how ridiculous everything is, but then I'm getting to participate. Maybe The Office.
Office. Cool. There
That
you
that'd
go.
be that'd be fun.
Cool, thank you. That is the end of the Coit Zone, which always leaves the two final questions I always ask. So, first off, what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities, stroke, guilty pleasures?
Hmm. I'm not very good, but I do play guitar and I just like noodling away on it. And I would love to one day perfect blues guitar. That's kind of my
Ooh,
dream.
that's a
I,
task, isn't it?
I would love to do that, but raised on rock and roll, so it's kind of hard to flip that switch in my head.
Hmm,
But so yeah, usually if I have downtime, I'll grab my guitar.
fair play. And the last question, what are you currently working on? Is there something else in the pipeline for you?
Oh yes, definitely. I am working on a book, and it's definitely fringy, very fringy. People will not be disappointed. It doesn't have to do with sleep paralysis. Um, but I did all the research and I was kind of just going to do the same thing that I always do, and it was going to look a lot like They Only Come Out at Night. And I have not spoken publicly on this, but I believe that I may try to rework it into fiction.
Ooh, go a novel
Yes.
route with it, sort of thing.
Yes. We'll
Oh,
see. Don't hold me to that, but
I won't.
that's the thought.
Well, good on you. You know, it's always nice to know that there's a next project, I think, because it's good
Oh
for
yeah.
the mind anyway, isn't it? To do something,
Yes.
to put a project on. I always think that anyway. Um, Thank you ever so much for your time today. It's literally been a joy, not to overuse your middle name. So thank you ever so much for your time, your candor, your honesty, and I've learned a lot again today, and I love to do that. So thank you.
Absolutely. I had a blast. Thanks for having me on.
Me too. And for everyone listening and or watching, check out the links in the description where you can buy the book and links to Vicky's site. So all that go in the description, and make sure you write a shed load of comments. We want to hear your views on what was said today. So thank you ever so much to you, Vicky. Goodbye. To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.